This is Michael Woodward, and this is episode 245 of Jumblethink.
T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to Jumblethink, where we interview amazing entrepreneurs about their journey of turning dreams and ideas into reality. Along the way, we're going to share some tips on how you can turn your own dreams and ideas into reality too. Our guest on today's show is Chris Schultz and Ann Driscoll. They are the co-founders of Launchpad. More about them in a minute. Whether you're a new listener or a longtime fan, if you haven't subscribed to the Jumblethink podcast, do it right now. Head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts, search for Jumblethink, and subscribe to our show. If you are an Apple Podcast fan, it's really simple. Jumblethink.com/iTunes, jumblethink.com/iTunes, and for Spotify, jumblethink.com/Spotify. Take you right to the app, right to where you can subscribe. While you're there, let others know what you think about today's show, too. Now let's jump into today's show. Hey there, welcome to Jumblethink. My name's Michael Woodward. I am your host. We have an incredible show with some incredible guests lined up for you today. Before we get rolling, we want to take a moment and pause and thank those people who make this show possible, our sponsors and our friends. Today's show is being presented by our friends over at Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of amazing classes covering dozens of creative and entrepreneurial skills and so much more. So go on over, check it out. You can get 2 months free. All you have to do is head on over to Skillshare.com/Jumblethink. That's Skillshare.com/Jumblethink, and you get 2 months free right now. Love what they're doing, so go check them out. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at Penji. Penji is your unlimited graphic design service at a low monthly subscription. It is awesome. We've been using them for a while and really love what they're doing. Use the code JUMBLE, JUMBLE, to get 15% off your first month at penji.com. Again, that's use the code JUMBLE, JUMBLE, to get 15% your first month, when you go over to penji.com. All right, so I told you I'm super excited about today's show. It's very true. Today's guests are Chris Schultz and Ann Driscoll. They are the people behind Launchpad. You can check that out, lp.co. Chris is the CEO and Ann is the president and COO. They are married and doing business together. So who are they and what is Launchpad? Well, I'm glad you asked. Born in Nigeria to American parents while they were working in the Peace Corps, Chris was inspired by the hustle, grind, and entrepreneurship he saw on a daily basis at the Nigerian marketplaces of his youth. He took that inspiration global, and from Nigeria to Russia to Silicon Valley and beyond, Chris has spent over 10 years bringing together the doers of the world, startups that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars in capital and created over 5,000 plus jobs. And as an early employee at Google, Ann became known as a brand whisperer, driving global expansion and cementing Google's legacy as one of the world's most beloved companies. In doing so, she saw firsthand how the advent of tech entrepreneurship worked to eliminate geographical borders and create a community of citizens of the world. Together, Chris and Ann understand that the future of work is work where innovation happens everywhere. Success requires working entrepreneurially, and strong communities inspire our sense of belonging. This is what fuels them as they travel the world looking for people with pride and cities with soul on their journey to be every entrepreneur's first believer. So Launchpad, what is Launchpad? Well, you're going to have to wait because we're going to talk about Launchpad, what it is, what they're doing. They are more than just co-working spaces. They are a catalyst for change and community by using the power of entrepreneurship to change our cities. Super cool stuff. We're going to talk about a lot of fun things. So let's just go ahead and jump into this conversation with Chris Schultz and Ann Driscoll. Our guests today are Chris Schultz and Ann Driscoll. They are the people behind Launchpad, and also they are a couple doing entrepreneurship together with a family. It's a conversation I've been looking forward to for a while. Chris, Ann, thanks so much for being on.
Thanks, Michael. It's great to be here.
Awesome to be with you today.
All right. Before we get rolling, people are going to need to know how to find and connect with you. So let's just let them know right off the bat, what's the best way to connect?
I love doing this. The beginning of a podcast means people can look us up while they're listening. I'm on Twitter at C Schultz, CSCHULTZ, and our company website is launchpadlp.co, and at launchpad on Twitter. Anne?
And I'm at Ann Driscoll, ANNEDRISCOLL on Twitter. And you can follow me and Harper AED311 on Instagram.
Perfect. And we'll put those links in the episode notes. All right. This, like I said, has been an interview I've been looking forward to. I love co-working spaces, but I think that what you're creating is more than just co-working. So tell us a little bit about the story of Launchpad, what you guys are creating there, and the origin story.
Sure. Launchpad is a network of co-working spaces across the country, and we started in New Orleans. And our origin story around Launchpad is after Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, me and some of the other members of the business community were trying to build back the entrepreneurial ecosystem, not to what the business community once was, which was kind of stagnant and staid and old-timey and just didn't feel like, very tech and entrepreneurial. And we had this opportunity to kind of refresh and build the community that we wanted to see. So we opened Launchpad as the first co-working space in New Orleans. We were actually one of the first co-working spaces in the country, and this was in 2009. And spent the first 8 years of the company really focused on the city of New Orleans and building the entrepreneurial ecosystem in New Orleans. And so expanded a couple times very organically. Built the community, and over time had a lot of impact. And companies working at Launchpad created 5,000 jobs, raised $160 million in venture capital, a lot of graduates out into the city of New Orleans, and so had tremendous impact across the city. And then stage two, and
we started. We decided we had something on a great idea that was worth pursuing with that kind of level of impact. What we did was started to expand into Memphis, Nashville, Newark, New Jersey, and most recently Stockton, California, with the idea that we wanted to replicate that similar impact on these communities across the country. And we call those communities momentum markets. And we really think of the model as co-working. We call it co-working plus plus, with the idea that we have a co-working space that activates a community of diverse, different types of businesses across these markets. But we also have the ability for us to be able to help attract and find investors to invest in those communities and in those companies. And then also we're working with a foundation that we've launched recently, or in the process of launching, where we are supporting underrepresented groups and giving scholarships so that they can actually have access to the kind of entrepreneurial services that we have to offer.
Now, the question that I know some people listening right off the bat are going to be asking is, all right, isn't there enough co-working spaces in the world already? We've got WeWork, which seems to be taking over every building in major metros. How are you guys different from what's going on at WeWork?
I think we really think about community first. Yeah. A couple of things that differentiate us in the market is we like to be able to go into an ecosystem or a city. We sometimes are actually the first co-working space there. So before we assume that there's a co-working space in every town and on every corner like there is in New York or San Francisco, there's a lot of places that either have a small co-working space that exists or only a few. And so we really like to go places where the city is really excited to have us come in, and the entrepreneurial community is looking for that community hub. And so Launchpad sees itself as almost like a community resource. Obviously, we have entrepreneurs who are using our space for co-working, but we host hundreds of meetups every week. We have all of our locations really member-led and member-driven programming. And we think about how do we become a member of the community, not just within our space. So being able to give them a great experience is one thing, our members, but it's really important for us to also be part of the broader community around. And so I think it's that interaction with the community, that creation of this sort of informal community hub and center for people to be able to come and engage and get inspired by other entrepreneurs within. Chris, do you have any other ideas?
Yeah, you're cutting right to the chase there with throwing the WeWork question out of the gate. But I think the fundamental thing is that the markets that we are opening in actually are very underserved from this perspective. So there's not necessarily a WeWork on every block. The other piece of it, as Ann mentioned, is this is a sector that is growing and is the way people are officing today. This is, people don't want to do a long-term lease. Long-term leases suck, right?
Yeah.
You've got to
been there.
You're a small you're a small business. You're being asked to sign a 5-year lease. You have no idea if your business is going to be around in 6 months. And you're often asked to personally guarantee it, right? So you're actually putting your family and your livelihood at risk with these personal guarantees. So that model is such an outdated model. And the way we believe this sector is going to play out is it's going to be very similar to the hotel sector. It's not a winner-take-all sector. There's not just one hotel chain called Hyatt. There's many hotel chains. There's hip hotels, there's the Ace Hotel, there's boutique hotels, and there's going to be different flags. Similar to co-working, there's going to be different brands that appeal to different people and provide different things.
Yeah, and I think on that, it's interesting. We're seeing a big change in terms of the interest level, especially of the millennial population. They're not looking for a cookie cutter experience. They're looking for really bespoke, artisanal, authentic, genuine type of experiences. And they're looking for that in their coffee shops, in the stores they shop at, and they're going to look for that in their co-working space. And we really strive to make sure that every co-working space that we open reflects the community that we're in, reflects the design aesthetic of that place. We don't want you to walk into a launch pad and be like, this is a launch pad. We want you to walk into a launch pad and feel like you're coming into a well-designed place that has a sense of place, that reflects that community, that has local artists, local coffee, that local experience, so that each launch pad is really unique and individualized, just like the experiences that I think our constituents and our members are looking for.
So cool. Now, earlier on, you used this term momentum markets, which I think that's a really fascinating term all in itself, but you are in cool markets. Some of these are, hipster centric. They're the cool places that people want to be right now. New Orleans is hot. Of course, that's your hometown and where you were born out of. But you look at Nashville, you look at Memphis. So how are you going in and really defining these are the momentum markets that are right for us, that are right for creating the ethos, the community, the style that is right for Launchpad to offer a service that is really underserving that community, but also is embracing what people, like you mentioned, millennials, I would even say younger Gen Xers are really into finding the things that are right for them. So how are you finding the markets that are matching right with who you are as a company?
Yeah, that's a great question, Michael. So let me ask you whether it's out of any of those cities that we're in or any other city, where would you want to go spend a 3-day weekend? What city would you like to go explore?
Right now, Seattle's on my list. New Orleans is always on my list. It's just a cool city. So I would say probably those two right now would be, if they weren't cities I'm normally in, those would be two of the cities I'd go out and explore.
Cool. Yeah. So, New Orleans, obviously we're there. Seattle would be a good fit. That's a question we ask people frequently, particularly people in, the Bay Area, in New York, San Francisco, in these major markets. What are cities that they're interested in exploring that have cultural and historic assets, that cities that have kind of a brand that's emerging. That's one of the ways we sort of discover these momentum markets. They have, one of our mantras is people with pride, cities with soul.
Yeah.
We're looking for cities that have kind of a soul to them, a sense of character. And the reason is because that's where people are moving. When you have a early part of your career in New York or in the Bay Area or in LA, and then you get to a point in your career where you're like, oh, okay, I'm actually, maybe ready to start a family, or maybe ready to buy a house, and you realize I can't even buy a house in any of these cities. That's the impetus to start to look around, and you might be going back to your hometown. You might, to where you grew up or where you have family, or you might be looking at what markets are kind of hip. Where are these cities that are growing? So Austin is a good example of this. There's been a lot of movement to Austin over the last 10 years. Colorado, Denver is also, has experienced this as well. We're actually looking for cities that are a little bit earlier on that curve. So we actually have a curve that we look at called a market potential curve. So cities should not aspire to be the next Silicon Valley. They should be the best New Orleans that they can be, the best Nashville they can be. And we like to move into these cities early on that kind of market potential curve, as they're gathering momentum, as they're becoming hip, as the coffee shops and the restaurants and the cultural assets are kind of happening, when there's artists there, right? When there's creative class. Those are the cities that we're looking at. So that's kind of how we define our momentum market, philosophy.
And we like that because of two things. One, the cities that we're going into, we want to be part of the activation and the creation of that, and the catalyst of the hub of entrepreneurship that can happen there, because that becomes a really good self-fulfilling prophecy for the city to become more successful. And we also benefit because I think we all realize that if we can create strong networks of these cities, we can ultimately be overall more successful together and stronger. And so we actually can create more connection points between cities as part of that network. And I think that's a really important part of what we do.
I'm going to pause here, change topics a little bit, mostly because in the background, if you're listening, wherever you're listening right now, you might be hearing some baby noises, or potentially one of my little kids making noise, slamming a door somewhere in our house right here. Part of the entrepreneurial journey, I think, for a new generation of entrepreneurs, I would definitely class you guys in with that. I'm like this, is that we have to navigate the complexities of family and entrepreneurship, because many of us are building businesses with our family. Can you talk a little bit about that, and how you, as a couple and as parents with young kid, at least one, I don't know if you have many, but if talk a little bit about building a life that enables you to have the lifestyle for your family and the entrepreneurial journey that you want.
Yeah, our other kid is a little brown dog, and she's sitting outside barking at us. So I think that it is the benefit of being on the entrepreneurial journey that you get the flexibility and the agency in your life to be able to design the life that you want. But it is also sort of, it is a new class of people who say it's more important to be doing the work than to, have everything perfect. And one of the things that we call it is work-life integration. And so I think people talk a lot about work-life balance. And we're not necessarily looking for work-life balance. We love the work that we do. It's really high impact. It energizes us and inspires us every day. But it's the idea that, we have to we balance all the things in our lives, and we're able to work from wherever we want. We can start a business wherever we want. And this is the case for any entrepreneur. And I think the work-life integration piece is around how do we actually make sure that, we're balancing all those pieces. And that means we hop on a plane with our 6-month-old and we show up in a city and we do all those things. I just recently opened our newest co-working space in Stockton. We acquired a space there or partnered with the space there. And I went and had a meeting with the big council of the mayors, and it was 105 degrees, and I drove to Stockton, and I brought some childcare with me, and I was slipping out to breastfeed midway through, and I did a fireside chat with the gang, and the reality is that we're just all in on the process, and that work-life integration works for us, and we're finding that the reception to that has been really, really positive, because there's never been a better time to start a business and to run a business. And I don't know if you've met working moms, but they have a tendency to be the most effective, They're definitely don't have any drama. They work really hard. And, balancing all these things doesn't actually make us less effective. In a lot of ways, it makes us much more effective at our job. And so it's been an interesting challenge. And I think we just kind of have embraced it, which is take the family on the road and we'll just figure it out as it comes.
I get that completely. We've been on that journey this month as a family. We've had some things in New York City with some events with our podcast that we've been doing. We've been to Columbus. We've been to St. Louis. We're now in South Dakota. We're integrating both work things and family things along the way. And for me, it frustrates me when people think that they have to segment their life so much. It can be all of it, and it should be all of it, because one affects the other. And if we are doing one thing well, we can do many things well and not have one thing negatively impact the other. And I love that you guys are incorporating that philosophy in what you're doing, because the influence you have is setting a new standard for those who you touch and reach. And that's the hope for us as a family, that we can be a beacon of this new model of family and work together in the entrepreneurial journey too. So I applaud you for taking that step.
The only other thing I would add, if I can, which is I think that's something people always sort of scratch their head, like, oh, how are you two going to work together? And now you've got a baby. And the reality is that, we all spend a lot of time at work. And the one thing is, when you're doing it with your spouse or your partner in life, is you all have the same goals, right? We are all objectively working towards the same thing as a family unit. And so being able to work on that and work on our business together, we have the same level of energy. We understand everything really deeply about what's going on. You end up having a lot more empathy for your co-founder, and much more clarity around what that work balance is. And you don't become sort of resentful of the other person who's, spending all their time at work. You actually understand exactly where that is. And so it becomes a lot easier to crystallize working together in some ways. And I think as an entrepreneur, you need that support, right? You get a lot of no's. It's really important to have that support in your partner, whether they're working with you or not. But being supportive and a thought partner and a guide on that journey is really, really important. And I would say, like, that's the advice I would give to any entrepreneur, which is make sure your partner in life may not be your partner in work, but make sure they're bought in on the journey and they can kind of be your sounding board, because you've got to have that support somewhere, and hopefully it comes at home.
So good. We're going to take a break right here, and in a moment we'll be back with Chris and Ann to talk more about Launchpad, creating communities. We're going to talk a little bit about inclusivity versus exclusivity, and we're going to talk about a lot more and continue this conversation. Today's episode of Jumblethink is being brought to you by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of amazing classes covering dozens of creative and entrepreneurial skills. You can take classes in everything from photography and creative writing to design, productivity, and much more. So whether you're returning to a long-time passion project, challenging yourself to get outside your comfort zone, or simply exploring something new, Skillshare has classes for you. Now, for me, one of my biggest regrets was never finishing college. But with Skillshare, I can go back and continue to learn on topics that matter to me. And this is so important to me. So join me and millions of other students already learning on Skillshare today with a special offer just for my listeners. Get 2 months free. That's right, Skillshare is offering Jumblethink listeners 2 months of unlimited access to thousands of courses for free. To sign up, go to Skillshare.com/Jumblethink. Again, go to Skillshare.com/Jumblethink to start your 2 months free now. That's Skillshare.com/Jumblethink. We also want to thank our friends over at Penji. Here's more about them. Penji helps startups, agencies, marketing teams, and businesses just like you achieve more with unlimited graphic design support at one flat monthly rate. Their easy-to-use online platform pairs you with a professional designer and lets you create as many design projects as you want. Think of it as your monthly subscription to top-notch design. No contracts, no hourly billing, just fast, simple, and affordable graphic design for all of your needs. We've been using this service for the last couple months for some of our own needs right here at Jumblethink, and we love working with them. So use the code JUMBLE, JUMBLE, to get 15% off your first month when you visit penji.com. That's PENJI.com. Use the code JUMBLE to get 15% off your first month. Now let's rejoin our conversation with Chris Schultz and Ann Driscoll, the founders of Launchpad. We are back with Chris and Ann. All right. I did a bunch of research, and one of the things that jumped out to me as I looked at your website and on your social posts is that you use the word co-working or co-workspaces a lot, but the other term that you use is a collaborative workspace. Talk to us a little bit about shaping a collaborative workspace versus a co-workspace, how they're similar, how they're different, and ultimately how that impacts the community around what you're building.
That's a great question and an interesting distinction for us because I think I would say we're both, but I think that collaboration element is possibly left out of some co-working spaces. So somebody once described Launchpad as there's co-working spaces that are, again, back to the hotel analogy, kind of running, the hotel rooms, and they, running as a business. And they said Launchpad, actually, the business is about who's in the hotel rooms. You guys genuinely care about who's working in the space. And I think that is a big part of sort of our, what Launchpad's essence is. We're a community, and we see our role as supporting the success of our members. One of our core values is our members are our magic. It's really, co-working space is not interesting if it's just a bunch of desks and chairs. It's interesting because of who the members are. And so part of the way we help to support the success of our members is through fostering collaboration. There's so many different types of businesses within Launchpad, and many people are on, at various phases, but on an entrepreneurial journey. Some sort of a journey of working entrepreneurially, whether they're starting a startup or whether they're a lawyer who just left a big law firm and is hanging out their shingle for the first time. And if we can foster this sense of collaboration so that people are able to work together, help solve problems together, answer questions, it really sort of helps spur the growth of all of our members. So we focus on that ability to collaborate and learn from each other. Not necessarily learn from Launchpad, but learn from the members who are in Launchpad, and that's kind of the core of the collaborative element to it.
I love at the beginning of the interview you talked about one of the things you set out to do in New Orleans was to reinvent how business operated and move from the old systems, the old stale models, and into a new model. Often when we start our own entrepreneurial journeys, we're so hyper-focused on what we're doing, what we're trying to build, that we forget the bigger picture of how it impacts and in turn it really impacts our community around us. It helps us engage in the city that we're in or the global community that we're part of. When you were building out the first Launchpad and you said, let's reinvent New Orleans in the business space, what can we learn about what we can do at our own level in our own businesses where we might be saying, hey, I'm not happy with the status quo of how things are being done. I'm not okay with leaving things where they have been. There's a new future we need to create. And it goes beyond just creating your business, but it's about the people you impact and engage with and entertain in the conversation. So from your own lessons of reinventing New Orleans for a new model of business, what can others take away and apply to their own business and into the movements that they can create that go deeper than just the business itself?
Yeah. That's a great question, and hopefully there'll be some insights here. First of all, I think one of the core elements of what you're talking about here is not just being an entrepreneur or a business person, but being a citizen and recognizing the role that you have the ability to play within a community, within your city, within your community, within your country, within the world, and understanding that your goals, hopefully they align with it. Hopefully the work that you do is able to have some sort of positive impact. through creating a company and sort of at the earliest stages of entrepreneurship, there was a big social entrepreneurship movement in New Orleans during that time. And one of the things that we would convey to entrepreneurs is your business itself doesn't have to have a social entrepreneurship angle. We don't all have to build Tom's shoes where we're selling a shoe and a shoe is being sent to kids who need a shoe. It's actually, if you're just building a business and you're actually creating an income stream for yourself and you're actually creating an ability to make a living, one of the most interesting and impactful things you can do is actually create your first job and hire somebody else, right?
Yeah.
And so many people, especially in these markets, these momentum markets that we talk about, and New Orleans is a great example of this. So many people would struggle to find a career and find a great job. So if you're creating a job where you can actually hire somebody, you're having impact and social impact in that way. And that's sort of a next step. And then, beyond that, I think it's all about engagement. I think it's, the thing that, we recognized that was a really interesting time in New Orleans, post Katrina, was that we really did have this blank slate, and it was very empowering, to take a leadership role in the community simply required stepping up and doing something. And I think in cities and in times when you don't have that dramatic, sort of knockout punch, and an event like the hurricane that impacts so many people and led to so many challenges for people, absent that type of an event, you're not necessarily on a day-to-day evaluating, hey, what can I do to help my city? It's not as in your face as it was in New Orleans.
Yeah.
But the opportunity is still there. You can play a leadership role simply by stepping up and getting engaged and doing something. And it's an amazing, I think, people wait for permission, and don't wait for permission. Just start doing stuff, and you'll build a platform for yourself and start a movement and kind of be part of it. Those were some of the biggest lessons we learned from those early days in New Orleans, was how easy it is if you have the impetus to step up and be engaged and have a positive impact.
I think that's really powerful, because often we think, maybe I'm not good enough to step in and actually make this change, or somebody else should be doing this, or do I really have the authority to step in and be the change agent for my community? And I look at so many of the cities in the country, and they're lacking that leadership of people stepping up to the plate and saying, you know what, this is my town, and I might not be the mayor. I might not have a multi-billion-dollar business that I'm running in the city, but I have a voice that matters. What should they do to get over that fear of saying, maybe I am this person that could step up? I haven't, you mentioned how New Orleans had the side effect of Katrina is a lot of growth, a lot of reevaluation and stepping into how do we rebuild the city that we want, not just the city that we had. And many people, like you mentioned, don't have that moment, that catastrophe that sets them on that path. So what is it that they can do to say, you know what, it's time for me to step up? How can they really have that fire, that passion, and the confidence to say, I'm going to go for it and make the impact my city needs right now?
I love what you're saying there. And I think a big piece of the work that we do is really in ecosystem development and connectivity throughout the world. And what you see when you do that, and it doesn't really matter where you are, you actually see there's a ton of unsung heroes in these communities, in these cities, that are already trying to do the work or want to do the work or are trying to do it. And if you're one of those heroes, or you desire to be, community building is really tough, right? It's a hard thing no matter what community you're doing. And what it takes is actually just people doing lots of small things. And lots of small things tend to build a really big groundswell of momentum. And so what I would say is, don't worry about boiling ocean. Get into doing one thing that you know how to do, that you want to do, that can be a contributor, and put one foot in front of the other, just like as an entrepreneur has to do, and do that thing. And don't do it once and expect it to be a big success. It's all about those little moments and those little consistent things. We have a food startup at our New Orleans location, and he started a meetup for other food startups in New Orleans. And just through that simple act and that regular gathering, there's been collaboration that starts to happen, inspiration that starts to happen, coaching and mentorship and all those kind of things. And those startups that are in the food space will probably be more successful because he had an idea of just gathering them together over a couple of beers at Launchpad to start to collaborate and have some ideas and to share some of the challenges. Even little moments like that have such a huge impact on your industry, on your city, and all those things. And the second thing I would say is that there are a lot of people that are doing this kind of work, and the cities tend to focus on their 3 talking point companies, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Here's the entrepreneur that you hear about every single time, or here's the company that's gotten successful, or here's this one. And so what I would challenge cities to say is, build your bench. There are people that are doing all of this great work. Celebrate them. Identify those people who are willing to do it. They're not getting paid. It's outside of their normal daily activities, and they're doing it because they have a lot of passion. And I would say to the cities, instead of having 3 bullet points on entrepreneurship and the examples in your city, have 15. And that's what you should strive for. 15 stories, 15 people, and start to elevate those people that are doing the hard work and are giving it their all every single day. And I think we're going to see a lot more people come out of the woodwork to do it. But it's a tough job, and it's often it often goes unsung and unrewarded. But people do it because they're just passionate about their community.
When you are creating a business like Launchpad, you have to create a specific DNA, a culture that you want to create. Two of the things that stood out to me that were DNA markers of this is Launchpad, this is what we stand for, this is who we are, were that you embrace not just entrepreneurship, not just small business, not just community, but also a culture of innovation and a culture of job creation. Talk to us a little bit about why that was important as a part of who Launchpad is as an organization, to include innovation and job creation, where in the landscape, I think that it's easier to say go start a business and not really get into what that looks like at the level of innovation and job creation.
Yeah, I think on the innovation side, and I don't know that we fully always use that term, but I think it is core to our DNA. I think that and culture evolves and strengthens over time. But I think something that Chris and I really believe in is that we want to work somewhere for that matters, right?
Yeah.
And so the idea of having an impact and working with others who are hustling just like we are is really energizing and important to us. And I think coming from the places that we've come, certainly innovation or making a difference or being sort of on the forefront of ideas is really important, because that's what actually ultimately changes and has an impact on both the economy and across the U.S. I'll lend it to Chris to talk about job creation.
Yeah, I think the other piece of it is that we define entrepreneurship very broadly. And we talk about our market in terms of people who are working entrepreneurially. And so job creation, comes from, a subset of startups, but it also comes from small businesses. It comes from people working remotely. When you're trying to build a community, particularly in some of these mid-market cities and smaller cities where we operate Launchpad, what you're really trying to do is just retain talent. You're trying to take the smart young people and who might be moving elsewhere for a job and provide opportunities so that they can stay there. So working entrepreneurially is about having agency in what you do, so that you can choose where you want to live and then bring or create your own job with you for yourself. So our job creation kind of starts with creating a job for yourself so you can be where you want to be, and then it scales from there. And then obviously there, hopefully are companies coming out of Launchpad, and there have been, that are creating hundreds of jobs in the community. And that's our goal from sort of a bottom-up perspective.
And we also have another secret reason we use job creation as a number, which is we want to send the message to every city that entrepreneurship is a job creation engine. And what we often are fighting, and we fight it even in our own hometown, is that the folks who think about economic development and they think about jobs and they think about where the city is going, think about trying to attract big companies to serve up jobs in their market. They try to attract the Amazons of the world. And they don't often focus on those small businesses and the entrepreneurs who are trying to make it happen in their cities. And so when we talk about jobs, and we talk about commercial real estate, and we talk about money raised, we are sending a very clear message to cities and to the city leadership to take a look at entrepreneurship in your own market, to look at how you can support those entrepreneurs and those small businesses and their growth trajectory, not when they've become your shining beacon example of entrepreneurship, but on their way up, when they're struggling to make it, when they're looking for grants, when they're looking for funding, when they're looking for promotion and PR and support. Cities need to be looking at their own talent if they really want to retain them. And that's why we use that number a lot. Because when we say that number has the same level of impact, if not more, of attracting one of the big guys to your city.
I think that's so powerful. And it's a frustration of mine. Government, whether at the local level or at the federal level, seems to want to penalize entrepreneurs instead of giving them the tools, resources, and the freedoms to really step into those places where they are set up for the best success they can as a risk taker, as a person who's saying, you know what, gonna go a different path. And this is going to have a ripple effect, not only with my family, not only in maybe a couple employees or 1,000 employees down the road or 10,000 employees as the business grows, but it has an impact in the community in turn, and then benefits. And it seems like a lot of governments and a lot of communities don't seem to understand or value the opportunities entrepreneurship give to change a city. So how, you mentioned there that you are having the statistics of like jobs created, businesses created, revenue, all of those markers. How else can we as entrepreneurs have a voice together collectively to say, you know what, it's time for government, it's time for local communities to stop trying to go after a big corporation like Amazon with the Amazon relocation and all of the tax credits and everything, and start saying maybe we can start building a community, have the same impact with a couple hundred or maybe 1,000 entrepreneurs in a city instead of one big corporation.
Yeah, I think one of the things is that's our goal, right?
Yeah.
Activate the community, create a hub for entrepreneurs to come together. That is, we are always stronger together.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we find, especially in some of these local markets, is let's not compete with each other. Let's compete together to send those messages. But, I think one of the things that Chris has been doing a lot over the last few months has been spending time in a lot of the different markets as we're looking at expansion and actually talking to city leaders. And I think there are some bright spots there, and I'll pass it to him to talk about that. But I think where we're seeing city leadership actually realize the power of entrepreneurship in creating strong ecosystems. So why don't you share a couple stories of cities that are doing that?
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of cities that are starting to realize that the best opportunity for job creation is going to be investing in our entrepreneurial community and our own ecosystem. And two examples of mayors who are very progressive in this regard are Mayor Greg Fisher from Louisville and Michael Tubbs from Stockton, California. These are mayors who are outspoken about the potential for the opportunity zones in their cities. And I want to digress just for a minute and talk about opportunity zones because I think it's important for listeners to understand what this mechanism is. It's a new part of the U.S. tax law that came into effect last year that provides a tax incentive for investors to invest their capital gains into underserved markets around the country. And these markets are called opportunity zones. And one of the biggest challenges to building a company for many entrepreneurs is access to capital.
Yeah.
And it's the ability to raise capital into a business. So this is now tax advantaged capital. Investors have an incentive to invest in operating businesses, and typically a lot of these tax incentives that have been around over the years end up as real estate incentives. This is actually an incentive that is designed to invest in operating businesses as well as real estate. In opportunity zones around the country. And there's over 5,000 opportunity zones. So your city probably has one. And it's worth understanding what that program is, because it is kind of a grassroots program around investing in businesses like these around the country.
For me, I've never heard of opportunity zones before today's conversation. It's something that I've been an entrepreneur. I've run my own business, had employees across the country for the last 13 years, and I've never heard of opportunity zones. So you mentioned it's kind of a new thing. How can people really start to find how they can use that to their benefit, or how to engage that, or be a voice in entrepreneurship and use our opportunity zones as a sparking tool in the larger picture of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I think it is early days in this tax legislation. It's the first year of it. I think Googling it, there's a number of resources online where you can kind of learn more about it. But opportunity zones, the funds that are forming are called opportunity funds that are investing into operating businesses. And the high level here is that 75% of the venture capital in the country flows to California, New York, and Boston. It's very hard to access capital in the majority of the country, and certainly in most of our momentum markets. So this is a tool. It's a tool if you're an entrepreneur that lives in an area that is underserved. It's worth looking into. And I don't want to go too deep into it because it can get pretty wonky. But if you get on Google, you can learn a lot about the opportunity zone legislation.
And there's 10,000 zones across the U.S. So if you're an entrepreneur in any kind of market, it's a federal tax incentive, but it's actually been administered by the states. So every single state has a zone, and most cities do too. And we happen to be placing all of our launch pads in zones so that we can be a place that companies can come who want to be based in a zone, but also because it is, it's a really has a potential to have a real impact on these momentum markets that we want to serve. And so if a city has a zone, you can look where they are, and then their department of economic departments will be able to help you think about navigating it, because they're all thinking about how they can make it better. And if I was an entrepreneur in any one of these markets, I would get in touch with that whoever my authorities are in the city, find out whether I'm in a zone, get myself in a zone, and get myself on their list of potential companies that money can be invested into, because there's a lot of money that needs to flow, and there's not a lot of places for it to flow, actually, surprisingly enough.
Wow. Yeah. When you mentioned opportunity zones, I thought, maybe like 100 zones across the country, but 10,000. That's incredible. It probably means that for most people, there is a zone near them that they can become a part of, whether it means moving their business into that zone or whether that means figuring out ways to use that to their benefit. It seems like this is something that most entrepreneurs could probably engage with.
I totally would agree with that.
Wow. As we wrap up this segment, we always ask a couple final questions. The first one is, you're doing really cool stuff. How are you finding purpose in what you do?
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about like the work that we do. We want to be working on stuff that really matters. And I think that the purpose is crystallized for us. I think the U.S. economy, and while we think globally a lot, we are really focused on the U.S. right now, because there is so much at stake to build a strong economy, to build a strong middle class. And the time has never been more important for us to think about the great American cities across the U.S. and make sure that there are, there is strength there, and there's economic strength, and it's been so polarized in terms of the wealth on the coast. And full disclosure, I've spent 20 years in Silicon Valley, so I am part of that makeup. But what we see and what I believe now is that there's so much strength to be had from creating really strong entrepreneurial centers, and just the idea that if we can help do that, and we can help companies put people in, help companies grow and expand and be more successful in these markets, then the work we're doing should have an outsized effect on the economy. Do you want to share how you find purpose?
Sure. I think, I would echo all of that sentiment, and rather than repeating it, I'll try to add to it. I think entrepreneurship is the greatest change agent there ever was. It creates this incredible flywheel of incentives. You build a business to have an impact, and you can make money doing it. You can create wealth. You can create jobs. So one of the ways that I think we're finding purpose is trying to apply entrepreneurship to some of the biggest challenges of our times. It's easy to get depressed, these days. I've actually been focusing a lot on climate change and, understanding. I think having a 6-month-old daughter will crystallize what the world we're leaving behind, or the world we're living in. These things are going to happen during her lifetime, and probably during our lifetime. They're happening today. Yeah. I think entrepreneurship is going to be a huge part of solving some of these challenges. And if you can build businesses focused on tackling major problems, that's the engine. That's the engine that we need now to tackle some of these challenges we're facing.
What is one challenge you're currently working to overcome at Launchpad?
So I would say we're going through. It's fun. We're going through a rapid growth and iteration phase. We're actually raising our Series A. So Chris and I, what keeps us up at night is, making sure we've got the runway and the capital so we can grow really quickly. But what keeps us also up and our team up is, with rapid growth, how do we maintain that level of the culture? How do we make sure that we stay connected and don't just become a big company to our members? And really, the thing we struggle with, or will struggle with, and I want us to struggle with it, because if you're struggling, that means you're working on it.
Yeah.
Is how do we actually scale culture? And I don't think anybody has cracked that code.
Yeah.
But the idea that will be the thing that makes our company unique. And it's the thing that we have to think about at the micro level, for our employees, as well as for our individual locations and our members, and then broadly for our network and how we impact the communities around us. And so I think the idea of balancing rapid growth and figuring out what our culture is important. Now, the good thing is that we also are very upfront that, we're going to move fast and break things a little bit, thoughtfully, obviously.
Yeah.
But, our members tend to be on their own entrepreneurial journey. And so, as I said to the guys in Stockton, I probably have a lot more to learn from you than you do from our organization. And please bear with us. We're not going to get everything right.
Long term, if you were to say, years from now, this is the picture we wanted to paint, what is that big goal? What is that big vision?
Creating agency in the lives of millions of people around the country and around the world. The ability for people to find their purpose, work on interesting challenges, build careers, build businesses, doing what they want to do. Agency is freedom. Agency is about being able to spend your time the way you want to spend your time each day. And so much of work has been I go to my job to make money, to pay my bills so I can live the life that I want. And we're really focused on finding that alignment between living the life that you want, doing what you want to do, and aligning that career, that work with the life that you want to live.
So we want to be the spark that creates agency.
Love that. Before we wrap up this segment, I love that you are allowing people to engage through the site to say, hey, do you want to bring this to our town? So how can people reach out and start that conversation to see if Launchpad might be a good fit for their city?
Yeah. Well, you can reach us through the website, lp.co/expansion. Or you can get in touch with us directly. My email is chris@lp.co. And what that really starts is just a conversation. I think there's a number of sort of stakeholders that are involved. If you're a community leader, if you lead a meetup, if you're an existing co-working space, maybe there's a way we can help support you or sort of bring you into the Launchpad network. If you're, in economic development or in government, we can help talk about what impact a Launchpad or an entrepreneurial ecosystem could have in your city. And we're having many of those conversations. We've got 40 cities that we're talking to right now. We're talking to real estate developers and mayors across the country. So we really are looking to grow quickly. Our next milestone is 20 to 25 cities by 2020.
Wow.
So within the next 18 months here, we're growing very quickly, and then growing quite a bit beyond that.
We will be back with Chris Schultz and Ann Driscoll to do our rapid fire questions. Today's episode of Jumblethink is being brought to you by Skillshare. I don't know about you, but as an entrepreneur, as a dreamer, as an idea maker, I constantly need to be learning. It's so critical for my success. But as an entrepreneur, I also know that my schedule is crazy busy, so I have to find solutions that fit my schedule. The solution I found? Skillshare. Skillshare is an online community with thousands of amazing classes covering dozens of creative entrepreneurial skills. You can take classes in everything from photography and creative writing to design, productivity, and more. So whether you're returning to a long-time passion project, challenging yourself to go outside your comfort zone, or simply exploring something new, Skillshare has classes for you. As I was searching for classes that I could take, I found one from Gary Vee. And if you know anything about the influencer space, Gary Vee is a shining voice with amazing insights. So who better to learn from than Gary Vee? Now it's your turn to join me and millions of other students already learning on Skillshare today with a special offer just for my listeners. Get 2 months free. That's right, Skillshare is offering Jumblethink listeners 2 months of unlimited access to thousands of classes completely for free. To sign up, all you need to do is go to Skillshare.com/Jumblethink. Again, go to Skillshare.com/Jumblethink to start your 2 free months now. That's Skillshare.com/Jumblethink. Now let's jump into rapid fire questions. We are back with Chris Schultz and Ann Driscoll of Launchpad. Are you ready for rapid fire questions?
We're ready.
The first question is, you're in Nashville, Memphis, Newark, New Orleans, Stockton. What's the next big city you guys are going to be at?
Mesa, Arizona.
Louisville, Kentucky.
Nice.
we're not sure. We're working on a couple.
We'll see where we get first.
Maybe San Antonio.
All right. So if you're in any of those markets, be watching for Launchpad and connect with them when they get to your city for sure. All right. First rapid fire question. As a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a doctor on a soap opera because I wanted to be an actress on a soap opera, but then I thought that I was a little bit smart, so maybe I should become a doctor on the soap opera. But because I didn't want to go to school that long.
Nice. What is one tip you'd give someone with a big idea or dream and they didn't know where to start?
Start talking about it. Start doing it. You got to get out there, and everybody is going to tell you no. Everybody's going to say that's a bad idea. Your parents are going to say, why would you quit your job? You just have to find that way to get started. Nobody's ever going to push you into it. You have to push yourself.
Yeah. And do one thing on it every week. And if you can't do that, then you probably don't have the conviction on it to keep going.
What's one big lie about entrepreneurship you'd like to break?
That running a lifestyle business is not interesting.
Okay.
I think a lot of times we, especially in the venture world, we make lifestyle businesses sound like it's a dirty word. But actually, I think lifestyle business is really a sign of, people integrating their lives, going all in on a company, and can be some of the most interesting, thriving, and most high impact companies that exist out there, and certainly ones that push the norms of the industries they're in.
What's one change you'd like to see in the world?
I'd like us to get our act together with respect to climate change and where the world is headed. That's a problem that entrepreneurship can be a piece of the problem solving, but it actually requires our government, our president, to get on board with the rest of the world. And I think people can educate themselves and understand the dynamics that we're going through right now and how urgent it is becoming.
What do you want your legacy to be?
The work I've done mattered, and that my home is a welcome respite from the rest of the world.
That's good.
Nice.
Where do you find inspiration?
I find inspiration in my family, and that's where I recharge, and that's where we ideate. That's why I'm very fortunate to work with Anne and for us to work together. And I also find inspiration in nature. We live in a kind of in the country in Sonoma County, and we're in this redwood tree grove, and I like to look up at the redwood trees and think that these trees that are 300 years old have been here long before us and will be here long after us. And so the short time that we have here, what impact can we have in the world?
What is one book you think every dreamer or entrepreneur should read?
So I'm not a lover of business books. I like the introduction because usually you can get most of it from it.
Yeah.
But the book that I read and I come back to time and time again, and I've read it, I've underlined it, and I've highlighted it, is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I really butchered his name. I think it is the best book anyone embarking on any journey, whether it's in your regular job or in your relationships or as an entrepreneur. And it's all about the journey being what the goal is. And it's about putting the work in and believing in yourself and continuing to work even in the darkest times to achieve what your goals are.
How do you define success?
Success to me is agency. The book I'm reading a book right now by David Brooks that's just out now. It's called The Second Mountain, and agency to me is freedom. And he defines the way a lot of people think about freedom as freedom from responsibilities, freedom from car payments, freedom from, and the way to think about freedom, and he conveys freedom, is freedom to.
Yeah.
Agency is about freedom to. I have the freedom to pursue what I want to pursue. I have the freedom to paint. I have the freedom to build a business. I have the freedom to spend time with my family. Success for me is the freedom to do what we want to do.
I'm going to ask both of you to answer our final rapid fire question. The question is, what is one dream you are still wanting to fulfill in your own life?
All right, I'll start with this. The dream that I really want to fulfill is to share the experiences with Harper, our daughter, that we've been fortunate to have in our lives. I was born in Nigeria, have traveled all over the world, have had the fortune to meet entrepreneurs all over the country and everything we're doing, and it's been such a rich life and experience and relationships and continues to be, and I want to be able to provide that for her in terms of that diversity of experiences that has shaped my life.
And weirdly, the biggest dream that I have that I'd like to fulfill for my life is that we get to live a really long one. And as long as we possibly can, no matter how messy or dirty or tough it gets. I want a long, messy life with my family, and to be able to enjoy all the ups and downs that has to offer.
And Chris, thank you so much for taking time to be on Jumblethink today, sharing your story. And I think in the bigger picture, taking the risk to step out and create an unknown future and show a different path for entrepreneurs. It's an inspiration to me, and I know it's an inspiration to our listeners.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us on, Michael. It was wonderful to be with you today.
Once again, we want to thank today's guests, Chris Schultz and Ann Driscoll, for telling us about Launchpad and all the exciting things they are doing. I hope it's encouraged you about your dreams and those big things that you know you are created to do too. We also want to thank our sponsors for today's episode, Penji. Use the code JUMBLE when you go to penji.com and get 15% off your first month of unlimited graphic design. They're doing great stuff. Go check them out. And we also want to thank our friends over at Skillshare. And for you, the listeners, if you want to learn something awesome, they've got a course right for you. Head on over to Skillshare.com/Jumblethink and get the first 2 months of your membership for free. On Friday, we are talking about finding purpose in entrepreneurship. I hope you come back and tune in this Friday for that episode. Now it's your turn to get out there, dream big, and change the world around you.
Vous êtes une autre personne. Les mères de famille, les enfants, peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant dans quelques mois. Lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps, vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.